is making here is that that allowing transgender troops to serve hurts lethality and it hurts readiness. What do you say to that?
Well, there's no evidence of that. I think that
CNN just couldn't help themselves again. They tried to ambush Scott Jennings over the transgender military ban, and he red-pilled the entire table without breaking a sweat. While they were arguing about feelings, Scott was talking about facts, and that's the exact moment the Matrix started to glitch. Let's get in.
that was the case. We've seen transgender people serving honorably for the last several years. And what has changed between now and then? They've just woken up to a new administration who has a different outlook on their ability to serve. So I think that, if you talk to people who are serving on active duty alongside transgender troops, they're not making these complaints. The leaders in the military are not making these complaints. These are political complaints about military service. So I think that all of the courts that have looked at this issue and looked at it, and said there's nothing in fact to back up what the government is claiming here. In fact, the judges challenged them to produce evidence, and they couldn't produce any evidence. So I think it's a really dark day for our country, where basically we're allowed to discriminate against a class of people.
Scott, if they can't produce evidence that this actually does, in fact, have an impact on readiness, I mean, how is this not then just discrimination?
Well, it's the opinion of the commander-in-chief, who, according to our Constitution, is the head of the military. I mean, regardless of anyone's opinion or anybody's, whatever side you're on, whether you're for it or against it, at some juncture, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, and he has and should have broad latitude to determine how the armed forces should be operated. And so I think that's what he's doing here. I think that's ultimately what the court said today, was that the president is the commander-in-chief, and we gotta respect that.
But I mean, to her point, if there's not a downside, and it's been going on for years now, and I mean, I'm just presenting your argument to them.
Yeah.
What is the argument other than Trump, Hegseth, just doesn't want trans people in the military?
Well, I mean, I think that the president, we'll ultimately see. I think that's why the court is allowing the president to move forward with this until it works itself through the court system. Maybe the Supreme Court will be the final arbiter here to say, yeah or nay, you can do this. But ultimately, I think the court is showcasing deference to the executive, saying that, look, you're the president, you're over the military. You do, for the most part, get to sort of dictate the standards of our military. And I don't really see how you can push back against that. Again, we'll see what happens in the court.
I can. I'm sorry, I can. What if the president wakes up tomorrow and says, I don't want any black people in the military? Do we give deference to him on that? Well, no, wait a second. It's not ridiculous. It's not ridiculous because you're discriminating against a group of people in a very similar way.
Comparing it to racism.
Excuse me, well, I'm glad you can.
I'm curious, why is it ridiculous?
If you noticed, this clip starts with CNN trying to frame Trump's decision as discrimination. They say there's no evidence that transgender troops affect readiness. But here's what they're doing. They're confusing activism with military logic. Readiness isn't about emotion. It's about dependability, cohesion, and consistency. Scott Jennings calmly, surgically reminds them that the president is commander-in-chief. He has the constitutional authority to decide military standards. He didn't yell. He didn't get emotional. He just dropped the truth right in front of a panel trained to ignore it. What CNN doesn't want to admit is that the military isn't a social experiment. It's a machine built for lethality and unity, not identity politics. You can't build a fighting force based on ideology. You build it on strength, readiness, and reliability. If a soldier requires constant medication to maintain a psychological state, how does that improve readiness in combat zones? It doesn't. But the media won't touch that question because it dismantles their entire equality over efficiency illusion. Notice how quickly they pull a race card. One of the panelists says, what if the president banned black people? That's not an argument. That's emotional manipulation. Scott stays composed because he knows being black isn't a lifestyle that requires medical dependency, but identifying as another gender does. And that's the line they refuse to see, because once you admit biology matters, their whole ideology collapses.
You just said the president should be the one who just decides.
Right.
So if he decides, he wakes up tomorrow and says, I think it's bad for morale. It's bad for cohesiveness, for there to be Black people in the military, Latino people in the military. Just in her hypothetical scenario, what's the difference between that and what we're seeing here?
I mean, are you really going to go down this ridiculous?
I'm
sorry. Is she,
I mean, this is
asking
ridiculous.
based-
This is a ridiculous argument.
Well,
The
okay.
president,
Considering what they've already
the
said
president
about
and the
me,
secretary of defense, the president and secretary of defense have an argument here. They believe that readiness and unit cohesion and overall operations of the military are impacted by this. That is their opinion, and that is the opinion of the commander-in-chief, who the Constitution gives broad latitude to run the armed forces. So that's their opinion. You're allowed to have one. You're allowed to have one. You're also allowed to run for president and become commander-in-chief yourself. But until you do, he's the commander-in-chief.
I have to just say, I didn't hear an answer to the hypothetical, right? I just didn't hear it. I didn't. I mean, okay. The definition of discrimination, according to the American Psychological Association, discrimination is the unfair or prejudicial treatment of people or groups based on characteristics such as race, gender, age, or sexual orientation. What is the difference between, prohibiting certain groups like transgender people from serving versus, people based on their race or even their gender, frankly?
I personally think there's a difference, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well,
It's crazy that I think they're too scared to actually express how they feel. He just personally thinks there's a difference, and he's just going to leave it at that, and he's not going to explain why. I don't know. I mean, I understand you're on a major network, CNN, and honestly, if you say the wrong thing, the cancer culture will come for you.
Are you saying that the quality of race and the quality of transgender are the same?
I'm just asking the question because I think you're making there's a distinction, but you're not explaining why.
No, I'm asking you guys brought up the hypothetical. Are you arguing that someone's race is the same as someone choosing to become transgender?
But your argument, you've made the argument twice that the commander-in-chief's opinion is all that matters. You've said that twice now.
Well,
So
under
if
the
they wake up-
Constitution, yes.
So if he wakes up tomorrow and says it's not okay to be gay or lesbian and serve, because that's his opinion, there's nothing to back that up. They meet the physical standards, they meet the intellectual standards, they have voluntarily decided to serve their country, to give their life for this country, so many of us don't have to. That it's the opinion without any basis in fact that's what matters more than the Constitution of equal rights and equal protection.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the other thing, or there's a few things that bother me about this, and mostly it was the language of the policy, right? When you're reading at some of these words, transgender people as inherently untruthful, undisciplined, dishonorable. That's like a very weighty thing to say about people who are courageously deciding to protect this country. The other problem, Scott, is that it's never enough. It's bathrooms today. It's sports today. It's sports tomorrow. It's the military today.
No,
and
it's also
This is the point where the Matrix starts to panic. They can't debate logic, so they rely on outrage and hypotheticals. Scott represents the red pill, calm, factual, grounded in reality. CNN represents the blue pill, emotional, chaotic, built on manufactured empathy. The red pill says military first, feelings second. The blue pill says feelings first, nation second. And that's why they fear Scott Jennings, because he exposed how fragile their logic really is. Another CNN meltdown, another day, the Matrix loses control. The truth isn't offensive, it's just inconvenient for the program. If you can see through the spin, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and stay locked in because the Matrix is cracking one broadcast at a time.